Welcome to the Hypnotorious Podcast. I'm David Barron, and with me today is also John Wiley. I have a hypnosis practice, two hypnosis practices we'll talk about, one in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the one in Ontario, Oregon. John Wiley works in Boise, Idaho. During the Hypnotorious Podcast, we'll be talking about hypnosis. This is for anyone interested in hypnosis, professional, amateur, or just someone who is interested in messing with people's minds. Essentially, what we want to do is just sort of talk about things that are interesting to us. Anything that comes to mind that maybe you've done, John, or some questions you want to ask, we can sort of share this with people.
Well, David, do you want to start off talking about what it's like to operate two hypnotherapy practices? I have some things that I'd like to talk about too, but I would like to get your input on what that's like.
It was honestly, I really sort of fell into it in an interesting way. I had lived on the East Coast in New Hampshire roughly 10 years, and I had my hypnosis practice there, New Hampshire Hypnosis. Went through some life changes, got a fiance that I eventually married, and moved to the other side of the United States, Oregon, and started a practice there. Now, when I left, I trained someone to take over, but that really only lasted about 6 months. She did a decent job, but she also realized she wanted to do other things. So I was sort of just left, and I had to figure out, okay, what the heck am I going to do? And I called my own office, which was still there. I still was paid for the office that the person who replaced me was doing, and we arranged a teleconferencing service. And essentially what I do is the office that I work with, they have a great service where they forward calls to my number. I talk with the potential client. I tell them what's going on. I tell them that because I've moved, I'm working with New Hampshire clients through a teleconferencing service. It works great. We talk about it. We set up appointments, and now all of a sudden I have two of businesses. One in Oregon, where I actually sit down and meet people face to face, and another one where I'm working with people virtually. And the interesting thing about it is the results that I'm getting when I work with people virtually. I have occasionally gotten the objection that you're not going to be there in the same room. You're going to be on a monitor talking to me. I've gotten maybe that objection a couple of times, but those who do not object have gotten great results, and it impresses me. I think actually for whatever reason, because they have headphones on, my voice is about as much in their head as possible when we're doing the
so, right?
Yeah, maybe even more so. That they get this dramatic result. But essentially my working in New Hampshire, doing it over the internet through a teleconferencing service, has benefited me incredibly. There are a lot of hypnotists out there who are doing hypnosis through teleconferencing services like Skype, and I think what's different about what I do is I have an office that people go to. I initially wanted, when I started the transition, I initially just said we could do it on your computer, but then I realized that can be an effort for some people, and they are expecting to come to an office. They're expecting to go into a professional location and treat it a certain way. Once I started to present it like that, and I already had the office, it really flowed nicely. So
yeah, that's really interesting because, one of the downsides that I consider with with being in a hypnosis practice is it's not very portable. And it's kind of concerning if someone is considering moving to a different area and they have, to one degree or another, already an established practice. And this is just one more really good option, what you're doing with your practice in New Hampshire and operating it from Ontario, Oregon, all the way across the country is, to still be able to work with those clients, to get really good results with those clients. Because, I've done Skype sessions before, David, and they can be really challenging in that the client doesn't always have equipment that is, unreliability issues and things like that. And that is a really elegant solution to have, already established equipment in one place. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, you have, the teenager turning on their music in the middle of the hypnosis session.
Yeah.
Things you can't control, or something boiling over and they start to smell smoke. Those things really distract from a hypnosis session.
That dang cat. Because that cat, it's going to sense how peaceful that person is, and it's going to want to get in on the action, and jump on that person. And I've often, I'll be honest, I've often wished that I could find some kind of tool to where, for those, especially those first-time clients that really aren't that great at hypnosis yet, that it's a very new experience, and distractions are far more of an issue because they haven't had a chance to really learn to go deeply into hypnosis yet. Mm-hmm. It would be so nice to be able to put earphones on that person to block out a lot of those, because music is helpful and music goes a long ways, but it only goes so far. If you could put headphones on that person to block out the distractions and a lot of the ambient noises that invariably happen in places, that'd be a big help. So there's pros to that.
Right. The unique thing about this is I can, and I've spoken with a business development person, I can set a practice up really anywhere now that I know how to do it. Right. The only difficulty would be in getting the clients to know where I'm at. I was very lucky in New Hampshire to establish myself the way that I did, so that I have an internet presence. People really like what I do, and so they started to call me. But if I wanted to, I could set up a website, do a lot of Google ads, whatever it is, that bring people to the website, that call the phone number listed there. It forwards to me, and I could have a business that I've actually never set foot in. If someone wants to do that, I'd certainly tell them how to do it. It's going to cost a little money, but it's a model that certainly works. I've proved it.
Yeah, and it's very unique. And it would allow somebody that maybe needs to move but doesn't want to abandon their practice to be able to really elegantly transition. Mm-hmm. If they wanted to transition, or who knows, maybe they don't want to transition. Maybe they want to have an office on either side of the country, which is really neat.
Yeah.
Now there's a company that you go through that provides the office that really makes this work well. Because normally you can't just rent an office space and then hire.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could hire a receptionist to welcome them in and help them learn how to use the minimal technology that's required. But
what they would have to look for is it's called an executive office. The one that I work with in Manchester is incredible. It's called, just look, if you do a Google search for executive offices near me, the setup is essentially that they will give you a phone number, which they'll answer when they call, and they'll use your name, New Hampshire Hypnosis, how can I help you? They'll refer the call to your cell phone so you can talk directly with the client. When you've booked the appointment, they will set up a room that you only have to pay for by the hour. And I had to set up the monitor and the teleconferencing equipment there myself, so that was an expense. But it paid for itself very quickly. And essentially, I'm only paying for the hours that I use. And again, it's very simple. Look for an executive offices. If you want to set it up, tell them the type of setup that you want. I think most of them will do a very good job of fulfilling your needs. So it's a great setup. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Hey, well, one thing I always want to ask is about challenges. Through the course of weeks or so, interesting things always happen. I always face challenges with clients and stuff, and I was wanting to find out if you've had anything that you've had to deal with and found a unique solution to.
Well, I mean, that's a good question, because we really are, more so than most people, in the solution business.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in daily practice, I think that I help the majority of people that come to see me. And sometimes it's more apparent immediately than at other times. Other times it takes a little bit of time to see just how successful a session or a series of sessions actually were.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always tweaking. I'm always experimenting with different approaches, and I find that one thing that helps me a lot, just as kind of an overarching attitude or mentality, is to be as client-centered as I can be.
Right.
So that tends to be my focus. I find that in those situations where I give my client choice, or at least the illusion of choice, right? Because what we do is
I always like to give them the choice. We can solve this easily or with a lot of pain. It's entirely up to you.
Right. we can this problem can go away today, or it can happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of thing. Because we're in the business of selling the subconscious mind on accepting that change.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I find that the more client-centered that I become, the easier that is to deal with that sometimes a little bit rebellious subconscious mind.
Right. Well, I had an interesting challenge with a client, and I might take some time to talk about this because I want to describe the technique to people so that some newbie who just wants to try it out has enough skill to do it. But I had a client come in, and she had cardiopulmonary disease. She was breathing oxygen 24 hours a day, and she smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And the first 2 sessions I was really challenged because she couldn't relax enough because there was discomfort that she had. When she did relax, I think her oxygen level was so low she went to sleep very easily. So the 3rd session, I did something that I've done before, but not in this particular way. It's a process. It's a pattern called meta yes, meta no. And if you find my YouTube video on that, it describes it. Essentially, I set up 2 sliding anchors. A sliding anchor is just moving the finger down, in this case, either the upper arm or the lower arm. Now, how I start off is I set up an anchor in which the person, she says the word no, and she really means it. So I ask her to think of how she would say no to a child who is running into the street, and I have her say it like that and bring up the feeling, and I slide the anchor from the shoulder down to the elbow, basically. And we practice that no, 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 sliding the anchor every time a lot. Maybe anywhere from 30 to 70 times. I go for the point where all I have to do is slide the anchor, and she can't help but say no. Even if it's a different context, we're talking about something else, and I reach over and slide the anchor, she says no. So I always go for that. And once I have the no anchor, I have her think of a craving for a cigarette, and I slide the anchor. No. Bring the cigarette to your lips. No. So I fire that off a bunch of times with relating to the problem of smoking. Next, what I do is I set a second sliding anchor. This one is on the lower arm from the elbow to the wrist. So as I move the finger from the elbow to the wrist, I have her say yes. And my objective is to make that yes as positive, as joyful, as excited as possible, so that she's almost laughing when I slide the anchor and she says yes. And again, do that until the yes just becomes automatic, doing it anywhere from 30 to 70 to 100 times. And every time you slide that anchor, it feels really good for her. Once that was set up, I just went through a description of her day and how she responds to things. And every time a thought of a cigarette would come up or a craving, I slid the no anchor and she said no. And every time she thought of the words, I'm a non-smoker, I slid the yes anchor. And we did this describing her entire day, from cleaning up her workstation, cleaning up her vehicle, emptying the ashtray, telling her husband he is not going to smoke, period, strongly and firmly. And the result was incredibly dramatic, especially for her, because during the whole hypnosis session, there was no way she went to sleep because she kept responding yes, no, depending on the anchor that I slid, and it worked great. And she was definitely in hypnosis because all of this was happening without her trying to make it happen. So when she was done, she said, I didn't think you'd be able to hypnotize me, and this was definitely something different. And she felt significantly better this time than the others. And now the tricky thing is, and the reason I described the process to anyone who's listening, is you can do this in a game-like setting where you want to F with someone's mind, basically. You just basically say, hey, let me show you something interesting about how the mind works. And think of something you'd say no to, nothing traumatic, and you set up this no anchor until they just say it automatically. You do the same with a yes anchor, and you make it automatic. And then, this is where you're going to mess with their head, is you tell them things like, you really like me, don't you? Yes? And they go, yes, I do.
Whether they want to say it or not.
You want to leave your boyfriend. Think of your boyfriend right now, and you slide the no anchor. Don't mishandle it. But I've played with this in some settings, and I would fire the yes anchor when I'd say, and you're really interested in my products, aren't you? Yes. But it's always fun. You want to buy me a drink, don't you? Yes, I do. Okay. So it's fun to play with if you set it up like a game, and it's really simple. I hope I described it elegantly and simply enough so that people can go out and have some fun with this. So that was a challenge that I faced that I overcame. I was sort of surprised. I mean, I had done this video on this pattern, meta yes, meta no, it's called, and I realized, well, I've got to do something different than just regular hypnosis. So it was pretty dramatic. I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So one of the things you were telling me is about your practice in Boise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this can be interesting to some people who want to set up a practice. How did you find your office? We talked about my office. The one I have got in New Hampshire was executive office. I'll talk a little bit about the one I have here in Oregon, but how did you find yours?
It was interesting because when I was ready to get into my office, the first thing that I did is I opened up the, it wasn't the phone book, but it was the digital phone book. I did a search for like chiropractors and other medical professionals in my area, because I figured, you know what, if they just have one room that they're not using, I really don't need that much space. You really don't need a lot of space for a hypnosis practice, especially if you're flying solo. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to find just a small room that I could use inexpensively. And the very first guy I called was a chiropractor. So there were lots of chiropractors, and so I thought I'd just start there, because I thought, well, it might take me, quite a few calls to find somebody that's willing to do this. But the very first call that I made, I talked to the guy, and he said, you know what, that sounds great, because I get so tired of working with massage therapists. And he went on and on about massage therapists and what a pain in the butt they are. So he said, you know what, let's give it a try. So I'm like, well, damn, that was easy. So if anybody else out there is going to use that idea, don't be surprised if it takes you more than one call, okay? Because I think I just lucked out there. But, I've been working with him. They're sharing office space with that chiropractor, and he's a very good chiropractor, for years. And we have a good working relationship. He likes that I'm there because he doesn't have to deal with massage therapists. I bring in my own clients, which are different than chiropractic clients, but still, a lot of my clients will come back and see him for chiropractic, and vice versa. A lot of times his chiropractic patients will come in and they'll see what I do, and they'll see people walking out of my office with this big grin on their face, and they'll decide, I'm going to go to John Wiley Boise Hypnosis to quit smoking now.
Great.
So it works out great, and it's just the one room, and so the rent is pretty inexpensive. In fact, he didn't even charge me anything at first, but he does now.
Wow.
So,
I had a very similar experience when I moved to Ontario, Oregon, and for those who don't know, Ontario, Oregon is not a metropolis. It is not like Manchester, New Hampshire, or Boise, Idaho. It's relatively rural, though it has in the surrounding area maybe 30,000 people or more. And I certainly did. I overestimated my ability to get clients, but because of the nature of the area around here. But when I came here, I was just walking down one of the main streets they have here, and interesting they said searching room rental massage therapist, and it just so happened I went in, and it was a hairdressing salon that's just stunningly high class and beautiful. And they had a couple of empty rooms, and it was the first thing I looked for. So,
right.
It worked out perfectly. It was right next to where my wife works, so it's not a problem. Seeing my sweetheart when I need to, and it worked out well. So, I do think chiropractors are a great place to work with. I don't know if you were. I don't know if chiropractors have a difficulty working with massage therapists. I don't know.
Maybe it was just that one. I don't know, but I suspect that there are a lot of chiropractors that feel that way.
Yeah.
Because they would expect the massage therapist would expect the chiropractor to send, him or her clients.
Right.
And then, and that isn't always appropriate, and the massage therapist would get miffed when they wouldn't.
Yeah, that's a good point.
See, but with us, we don't really expect that. There's no expectations that way. It's just we're benefiting each other off of our own individual traffic. Now, and I will say too that there are those out there, and I considered, and I actually did this for a while years ago, is I would operate out of my home. Now, obviously that's an option that some people choose, but I really don't like that option, because even I'll tell you, clients from their perspective, they would much rather go to an established business, even if you're sharing office space with a chiropractor or even a nail or hair studio, than go to someone's home.
Right.
Even as professional of an image that you can manage, you really are, in my opinion, my humble opinion, you're better off going with an office, an inexpensive space, maybe that you rent from another healthcare professional, or even like your situation, in something like that.
Yeah.
Than operating out of your home.
I would agree. I wrote up a little document once, it's 30 or 40 pages. I called it Hypnosis is Your Business. And it was about how to sort of start up a hypnosis practice. And there are benefits to having a home office, and I know plenty of CPAs and actually attorneys who work from a home office. And it functions well for them in that way. But, you're getting in the healthcare profession, it can get a little weird, I think.
Especially with hypnosis, I think.
Yeah.
So than other maybe an attorney or a CPA. With hypnosis, there's already many misperceptions out there about it. You're better to err on the side of caution.
Mm-hmm. Right. Totally agree. This has been, we've been at this for a half hour plus. It's sort of flown by. I want to just, anyone who's listening, if you have questions, please address it to the links that we have wherever we put this audio. It'll probably be on John's site. It'll certainly be on at least one of my sites. And if you have any questions, let us know. We're going to do this as regularly as possible. Sign up so that we can announce it to you. And any last thing that you want to say, John, before we sign off?
No, man, there's so many things that I'd like to talk about, but I'm sure we'll have, moving forward, we'll have other opportunities to discuss those things.
Oh yeah, make a list. We'll cover it and see how much we can cover in a half hour or so. All right.
That sounds good.
All right. Hey, John, thank you very much. This has been the Hypnotorious Podcast, Two Hypnotists Talking with John Wiley, and I'm David Barron. Thank you guys very much. Take care.
So long.